Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylord, and I'm joined by my good friend Vic Vijay. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the Fireside and listen. Come on down. It has been a minute, hasn't it?
It has, but it brings me with so much joy just to listen to that introduction music. I don't know, I just get happy as soon as I hear it.
Yeah, we do it a bit differently for those that don't see the other side of it. But when we play the introduction music, we do it all live. So Vic and I are just here waiting while the introduction music is playing. It's even funnier when you have when you're on video chat.
Yeah, we're both just bopping along.
Just sit there. Episode 53. It has been a minute. I did the CSM read through, which was kind of enlightening. It was kind of nice to read through the codex and stuff like that. And then yeah, but we've got Vic back because we just played the international team tournament. And spoiler alert, England won this time. So big congratulations to England. They put
Well
up
done, England.
Yeah, they put up a tremendous effort, and they had some innovative lists. So yeah, props to them. It was nice to. They were all great games, and it was kind of nice to lose in some sense because I think it reinvigorated the fire a little bit as well.
Definitely.
Which was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, was there
Well
anything that you
deserved.
would like to cover in the interim, Vic?
In the intro, well, I mean, in this episode, we're going to go through.
Oh, I apologize. Because I'm an idiot, I've obviously just muted Vic by accident.
Oh, hello,
back.
I'm here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to discuss in this episode. So the ITT is a huge tournament, you know. How many players, Dave? Is it 300?
No, 350, 370, I think. Something around there. Yeah.
So it all split up into teams of 5. So this is an absolutely huge team tournament. And I think in this episode, what we'll do is we'll go through the lists that we eventually ended up taking, the reasons behind it, because we didn't do an episode before the ITT. So we're kind of combining everything together this time. And then obviously we can go through all of our rounds. And I think there's a lot of really interesting analysis, like both from like the way we prepared, especially with the overlap with WTC, and the kind of Warhammer, competitive Warhammer is a little bit of a psychological game, you know, and it requires a lot of kind of reflection and thinking about ways that you can improve in order to keep getting better. And I think we can take away a lot from this tournament. And, you know, some of the discussions I've had with the team following the tournament has been really, really insightful. So, yeah we'll try and share some of that with you guys.
Yeah, so we had a lot of discussions with the team, and obviously on the car ride home where Yoko, Brian, Boris, and I were driving together, so Vic wasn't kind of part of that. But I actually think that a lot of those discussions and improvements we wouldn't have come to if we had won, actually. So kind of makes you stronger in the long run, so to speak. But I think, should we go through the list development, Vic? What we were kind of going through. So I guess for people that aren't aware, we do a series of meetups every week. So for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks before the event, we meet once a week as a team, and obviously we're chatting before then, just to come together about what we think about the meta and lists, and we've got kind of matrices and stuff like that about a month out. So we're kind of evaluating lots of different armies to play and whatnot, and we have some philosophies in the team, I would say, right? And when it comes to faction choice and things that we believe are important, and I think playing a faction you're comfortable on is always at direct odds with playing things that you think are optimal for the matrix, right? And
Yeah.
the pros and cons of each of those is that you could play a faction that's stronger, or you could play a faction that you've got a much more accurate matrix, and even if it were, an 8 per se, you would have the experience to grind it out to maybe a 9 or a 10, right?
And the correct answer is probably somewhere in between the two, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you have the ideal list that has to be in the matrix, but you absolutely hate playing it, you probably still shouldn't take it.
Yep.
But, you know, a little bit of discomfort in order to take the correct faction for the matrix is probably the correct place to be if we need it.
Yeah. I think there's probably a few hard lines, isn't there? For example, if you don't have a typical defender list, or you don't have a shooting army, for example, right, depending on the tournament format. I think the UKTC team events definitely, for this tournament format, definitely favor having at least one shooting army, primarily due to the terrain, but also because, for those not aware, After you do the first defender pairing, you then roll off, and once you've done the pairing, you roll off, which, by the way, is wild. I think they should definitely change that. But once you've rollen off, you can pick the heavy or light table. So, for example, you might put Tau forward, they might put two attackers, you pick one, and then you roll off to see if you get the light table, which I'm not a big fan of. I think almost everyone would unanimously agree that they would rather roll off beforehand, especially because then it means that you can decide if you're going to put maybe a melee army forward and try and get a heavy board or whatever, right? Or play for a
Yeah.
medium board, for example. But yeah, there are some things that favor having at least one in your composition, and I think that's probably where the line is, isn't it, Vic? In terms of is someone sacrificing enjoyability, perhaps, or experience for playing an army that fits a designated role that is kind of required, isn't it?
Yep. And wherever possible, you try and look for the win-wins, you know?
Yes.
Like, and I think the win-win-win would have been that everyone is playing an army they like, an army that's really good and relevant for the team composition, and an army that they're practicing for WTC. I think that third element is slightly different in this ITT compared to the previous two that we went to.
Yes,
And
definitely.
it adds a little bit of spice to the way we kind of prepped, I think.
Yeah. However, that probably wouldn't affect the majority of teams that were there. That's probably only
True.
affects three teams, I would say, or maybe four actually. Sorry, Scotland, Wales, England, and Ignite being everyone is a WTC player in our team. But yeah, you're right. I mean, so yeah, why don't we jump into it? Where do you want to start on this one? Because I guess we were a little bit all over the place, weren't we? Oh, I think we had a couple of lists set with players, didn't we? So we had our lineup was Brian playing Tau, Boris playing Sisters, Yoko playing Grey Knights, myself playing Guard, and yourself playing Thousand Suns. And
Mhm.
we immediately off the bat had Boris playing Sisters. Boris is typically, I would say, a person who plays usually one army, mainly because he's a huge hobby enjoyist and he has a huge Sisters project. So that's kind of what he's been playing for a long time. And then where do we go from there, Vic?
Yeah, from here, I think the four of us were very flexible in this one
Hmm.
because I mean Brian's been doing a huge amount of stuff with Team USA across a number of different factions,
Mm.
so he had a lot of options here. Me, I've got kind of faction speciality in both Eldar and Sisters.
Hmm.
With Sisters out of the way, Eldar was absolutely the option that probably I could have really gone with. And
Hmm.
to be honest, I was planning on going Eldar for quite a long
Yep.
time during our preparation phase.
Hmm.
And then I think Yockel was the one I was most worried about him just not having a faction here.
Yeah. But he slotted right into Grey Knights, didn't he? And he was doing
Hmm.
really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously there was a little bit of a curveball with you because
Yeah.
you are a faction specialist with Guard, but they've
Hmm.
taken a big hit in the balance slate.
Hmm.
And what
I
what
think
did you
I
think? How
was
did you get to it?
behind the scenes. I was flip flopping the most, wasn't I?
Yeah, you tried quite a few different things.
It was kind of myself. You for you it was either you playing T Sons or Elder, and then Yok was playing Grey Knights, Boris was playing the Sisters, and Brian was pretty much locked in on Tau, wasn't he?
Hmm.
But yeah, I was trying a bunch of stuff. I could always play 18 Wraiths, but I really didn't want to play that. And then I could have played Orks, so I was actually playing some Orc games. I played Bully Boys and Green Tide. I think I played a game of Marines, and then I played a game, and then a couple of games of T Sons as well. So I think I
Mhm.
played five different factions almost there.
Yeah,
I maybe
wow.
could have gone Elder, but probably not. But yeah, I ended up going on our last team meeting. We decided that I should play Guard,
Yep.
and I think it worked out well. But I think if I was had to be really objective, I think
Mhm.
I always knew that playing Canoptic Court would probably have been the better result. I
Mhm.
think it was definitely the stronger all-around list. But there was the argument, and the way that I designed most of the list is for round six, and Guard, particularly good on round six, I would say. But the list, has lost a few things, which maybe we'll get to. But yeah, was there any
Mhm.
other closing remarks on? I guess
Um,
go. Why don't you go into Orcs, no Orcs, where Orcs sit? Maybe we should go through a little bit of the factions we didn't play.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's quite a few ones we could have taken. I mean, we didn't take Eldar, we didn't take Orks,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't take Necrons.
Mm-hmm.
We missed a lot of the top of the meta out of our thing. I
Mm.
mean, probably Necrons is the key omission.
Yeah, Blood
Um,
Angels is probably up there as well. Or
yeah, we didn't
Marine
we didn't
variants.
take any Marines.
Yeah,
Gosh,
yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of wild, but so I think a very interesting point here is, I mean, we've discussed this in the past about going to singles tournaments and looking at the people you're competing against and
Mm-hmm.
trying to, develop a strategy to negotiate playing against those people if needed. Either be that tailoring or just accepting that you're just going to lose that game, or developing a strategy in the game to try and win it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this particular thing. So when we go to a singles tournament, there's a handful of players, like a chunk of players that could beat us, especially if they have faction advantage.
Mm-hmm.
In teams, when we have a team like this where it's like five top players playing,
Mm-hmm.
the effect gets kind of magnified, where less and less people could compete against five really good players.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to look at how we're going to win this tournament, the number of teams we have to compete against really reduces.
Mm.
It's
Yep.
it's really hard for for anyone outside of another team of five really top players to try and compete against us. I
Mm-hmm.
think, and I
Yep.
felt that a lot in this tournament. More and in a way, it makes it a little boring, but also it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that's definitely echoed by the fact that our matrices weren't that great pre round six. I would say, right? We
as in, we were just way above it, or
No, as in if we did the analysis of how our factions lined up against other people's factions, I think we weren't particularly got some speedo.
oh, yeah, I know.
um, we didn't have a lineup that was greens across everything, right?
No.
Or not that that exists, but you take my point, right? I think round one, for example, we played against on Dawn of War, Astra Militarum, T Suns, World Eaters, Blood Angels, and Orks, and when we got our round one pairing, I was like, that was the Warwickshire Warhawks.
Yes.
I was like, man, our matrix is pretty bad into these guys,
Yeah,
and their lists were
absolutely.
really good too.
Yeah, I think their lists line up really well into us.
Yeah.
So when we look at the matrix, so the comparison of how we expect to do with our factions versus theirs,
Mm-hmm.
it really didn't look very hot,
Mm. Yeah.
But when we start playing the games and the way the differential scoring kind of works, and the way that you need to win these rounds by getting more than 5 points
Mm-hmm.
total than your opponent. So out of the 100 points, you need to get 55.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really hard to lose the round if you've got just a couple of players just like doing really, really well or having a big
Mm.
skill advantage.
Yeah.
So I think quite early on into that round, we started to realize that we've got a big advantage here. It doesn't matter if we like draw or lose a few games,
Mm-hmm.
because we're going to get some big wins out of some of these.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so
fascinating.
you did raise a good point, which is the draw
Mm,
bracket, which was something new that was introduced for this tournament.
mhm.
The draw bracket was quite a large. Oh, I'm gonna say. Oh,
Oh, bless
apologies.
you.
The draw bracket was quite brutal in this tournament. I feel because it was a 4 point draw bracket
Hmm.
on an 80 point on a 100 point system. So, for
Mm,
example, you had to win. There were 100 points up for grabs. You had to win 55 plus to win.
hmm.
Whereas on WTC, it's 50 on. It's a 6 point, a 5 point differential. You need to win. Correct me wrong. 86 plus to win, right?
Hmm.
So the relative uh, draw bracket is a lot larger for this tournament than for WTC, for example.
Hmm.
So each player needs to average about 11 points, where WTC is slightly under that. And I think probably for improving the tournament next time, I would probably reduce that to 53. That would just be me though, just to reduce the amount of draws slightly. But I think the draw bracket was a good inclusion for this tournament as well, wasn't it?
That was a good idea.
Yeah,
Well, Dave, in that first round, it might be a good idea maybe if you go through your list and what your first round pairing was.
sure, yeah, yeah. So I'm quite cognizant of the fact that I am still playing guard, obviously.
Hmm.
But I think that a lot of that came from I wanted to play something I was really going to enjoy as well. So my list was my ETC list, but I took out 6 Bulgrin and 2 Scout Sentinels, and I only added one Lehman Battle Lehman Russ Exterminator, and that's the one where you shoot it and you get a bit more AB against a target.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of people might think that's not a big difference, but it's about 400 points of difference across your whole list, so roughly 20% difference, right? And my list didn't really have a lot of board presence in the mid board, so when I found a lot of these lists like World Eaters, Blood Angels, and Orks, I was thinking, especially on Dawn of War, I was like, man, this is quite bad. I haven't got a
Yeah.
lot to play with. My army moves 10 inches. I have 3 infantry units to move block with, and I have no access to fall back and shoot. So you're playing with not a huge toolbox of things, I would say.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that was a list I ended up playing. I didn't really have a lot of time to innovate. There was a Lehman Russ variant list I was playing for a little bit, but I just didn't really land on something I was super happy with. But I do think it's a viable archetype as well, and maybe still 18 Bullgrun's are viable on WTC if you're thinking about that. However, for UKTC, where shooting elements are a bit more prevalent, especially on the possibility of playing the light table, and Ironstorm being quite prevalent in UKTC as well, I don't think the Bullgrun's line up very well there.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
kind of why I went
Okay.
with that. So yeah,
Fascinating.
played round one against Sam Johnson, Blood Angels, and
Mhm.
I tell you what, I got a bit lucky this game. I didn't go first, but my opponent, he was playing a pretty standard Blood Angels list, but he had a Lancer, a Destructor, and he also had so he had a Lancer and a Destructor. But he had 10 Death Company with jump packs and 10 Death Company walking. Now, the Death Company that walk are obviously not fantastic against me, but the game kind of came down to it's Dawn of War, and the Dawn of War map for UKTC is it's not the best design map in the world.
Mhm.
If you ever want to see a map where you can shoot into your opponent's deployment zone, that's basically it. I think it's about time we move to sweeping engagement. Personally,
Definitely.
uh,
Yeah.
I think it's like the most complained about one. But it was one of those games where my opponent went first, which is obviously a huge advantage, and Blood Angels versus Guard because I can slow and get board position otherwise. However, when his Lancer came out turn two to shoot me, he Oath Momented my Basilisk, rolled a double one to hit, and then re-rolled it into a 1 and a 2 to hit as well.
Oh, brutal.
And I mean, I was just like, oh, I got away with murder right there because
Yes.
probably kills the Basilisk on average. And I mean, swings and roundabouts there. I rolled a bit. He rolled very well on his saves on the first turn, and then the second turn rolled very poorly. So it was kind of one of those big up and down these swinging games. But yeah, the Blood Angel matchup I think is a good one for Guard actually. Funnily enough, especially if you go first. And actually, I guess a lot of the point of playing the 4 indirect piece, 2 Basilisks, 2 Manticores, was actually just to keep people honest, wasn't it?
Hmm.
A lot of
Yep.
people, I think, came to this tournament thinking indirect wasn't going to be a thing, and in a lot of my games, my metrics are significantly better, usually because my opponents hadn't actually put the elements that they usually would put in them to protect themselves from indirect, and that kind of gives you an advantage here. So Sam Johnson, lovely game, and yeah, sorry about the sorry about the Lancer. How about yourself? You played against Bully Boys as well, round one, right?
Yeah, I did, and I actually found it really interesting because
Mm-hmm.
a couple of factors here. I've never played against the Bully Boys. I've only read their rules a little
Mm.
bit or heard people talk about them, and also I hadn't really practiced with T Sons.
Yeah.
I played like a quarter of a practice game against Brian, where he basically tabled me in 2 turns. I learned a lot from that. He used his Tau, and he just like completely obliterated me because I had nowhere to hide on UKTC.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, that kind of thing helps me to do my matrix and avoid the really, really bad matchups where I'll die on UKTC.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while I die to guns, one thing T Sons is very good at is dealing with melee armies and
Oh.
pressure armies that run at you. And Bully Boys is definitely an army that does that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Isaac was actually really good. He was a great player, and I think he played this game really, really well, um, except for one early game mistake. And his early game mistake was to leave a truck just slightly exposed,
Mm.
and I went first, and he didn't have the wah up
Mm.
on his turn, and I managed to kill this truck and the mega knobs inside before he got his 4 up Feel No Pain.
Mm.
So I gained so much momentum by that.
And I guess
Um,
if you pop the truck with a Doom Bolt, then
mm,
Magnus will just one tap them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was able to set up a lot of stuff to activate into this unit,
Mm-hmm.
which was really spicy.
Mm.
But my list was a really straightforward T Suns list. 5 units of rubrics with 5 characters in. 3 of those are exalted. 3 of those are infernal masters, a sorcerer and Ahriman.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 exalteds on disc, Magnus, or 2 rhinos. Sorry, 1 rhino and 2 units of cultists. Standard, straightforward list. Really great. 23 cabal points, so loads of cabal points, and after this initial kind of trade, he then activated the War, and the next 2 turns were turns where his Mega Knobs would have the 4-up Feel No Pain. And I thought that I had created a position where he wouldn't appear in front of me with the Mega Knobs, because I think what Thousand Sons don't want to do is risk the dice here against 4-up Feel No Pain, 2-up armor guys that are standing directly in front of you, and you have to kill all of them, otherwise you get very heavily tagged up the next turn.
Yeah.
So I was quite worried because he managed to create this situation where these mega knobs suddenly appeared right in front of me by deep striking one of them and hitting a really nice, juicy advance with the other one.
Oof.
Um, so then I started my turn and I kind of pulled off every single combo, Doom Bolt, another Doom Bolt, and also turn off armor saves. And, Ahriman helps out with the Cabals there so it doesn't go too high.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just started shooting. And what I've learned is that Thousand Suns can pretty much exactly kill 2 full units of Mega Knobs with the characters in if you can activate everything into them.
Jeez.
Um, yeah,
A lot of
and
damage. I
I,
guess. I guess when
I
you think about it, if you turn off
mm,
armor save, they
mhm,
have a
on one of
5-up
them. Yep.
invuln and a 4-up feel no pain, right? That's
Mhm,
30. So that's kind of equivalent to just having a 3-up in some ways. You know what I mean?
mhm. Yeah, and actually, you can turn off armor save on both of them. I don't think I did in this
Oh yeah, of
game.
course. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you can do some spicy levels of damage output if you get your sequencing right, and
Mm.
especially if they touch the objectives.
Oof.
And I played Bully Boys. Spoiler: I played Bully Boys again in this tournament, and both of my opponents put one of those units on an objective with the character. So I was getting full rerolls to wound with my rubric squads against that unit.
So I guess
Um,
you, if as a bully boy player, you should put like a truck or something useless on the objective, and then your bully boys just completely aggressive into your opponent's T Sun's army, just not on an objective, right?
yeah, I think what's interesting and my takeaway from those 2 games against Bully Boys is that if that army runs at you and tries to push a high score, I think the Bully Boys just die.
Mm-hmm.
But if the Bully Boys tuck in behind walls, wait for an opportunity, and just play for around the draw mark, I actually think it's a little challenging for T Suns to push much of a high score here.
Yeah.
And
For
I think
example,
it's important.
if they
Mhm.
don't use the Warg in the first couple of turns as well, you say?
hmm
Mm.
And just tuck in real hard behind walls, but just express threat onto the objectives. Use your Meganob squads as trading pieces, albeit very expensive trading pieces, but just stretch your resources out so that they last for the entire game rather than just for a push turn.
Mm-hmm.
I think is a much more successful outcome for the Bully Boys player versus T Suns.
Bully boys. I mean, Magnus
Yeah,
is pretty
so
good in that matchup, right? He's got like high
yeah.
OC and -1 damage. Oof.
Yeah, saying that, I mean, he connected like a couple of times with war bosses fighting on death.
Mm.
And I think he had 2 fight activations, and Magnus was down to like 3 wounds. So Magnus will die if he
Mm.
gets engaged by the Bully Boys.
Yeah. But
But in
but
the
Magnus
end,
Castle of +1 to wound is super good there, though, right?
oh yeah,
Just
the,
like
the
unloading into people.
strategy the strategy for the T Suns player is you put your entire army on one objective outside your deployment zone, all around Magnus, and you
Yeah.
just create this ball of doom.
You just create a mop bucket and you erase her across the board with your giant psychic castle.
Exactly, and it's all +2 to move. You don't really need to
Yeah, yeah.
activate the -1 damage
True,
on
true.
Magnus.
Because
So
you can block Magnus off anyway.
everything's moving 7 inches. The characters are shooting 18 inches, probably indirectly.
Mm.
So you have 25 inches of threat you can express off a no man's land objective.
Yep. Which
So
is
even if your
easily,
opponent,
and
plays
that's
a
easily one objective to another, obviously.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
you can kind of get like all the way into your opponent's deployment zone or across the board with that kind of threat.
yeah.
So yeah, just
Just
rinse and repeat.
don't pick the middle objective as the one you're going to go to first.
No, it has to be a side. You have to go for a side and corner, and
True.
have one edge which they can't attack from.
Yep, definitely, definitely.
Yeah,
There we go.
17-3. Nice.
17-3.
Tasty.
Scooping up those orcs, baby. 11-9 for me versus Blood Angels, which I think is representative, probably, of going second there. Definitely.
Definitely, it's a good score, I think, in that matchup.
Round
Yeah.
two. When BCP loads. My favorite app. To round two. Now we actually got paired down this round. So we got paired down, I
Did
believe,
we? No,
into.
not in this one. In the
Oh,
next
not in
one.
this round,
Next,
sorry.
yeah, the next
To
three.
Team Napalm Hobbies,
Hmm.
which is a. Forget where these guys are from. Sorry if I forget that and you're a listener. But what I would say is that every team we played against was fantastic as well. So
Oh, that was so lovely.
yeah, I played against Michael Sonsino on his Dark Angels. I'm just going to refresh myself with the list. This one
Hmm.
looked to be a little bit of a good one for me.
Hmm.
He had the Reapers, Scouts. Oh yes, this was the game where my opponent seemed to fail every single save under the sun. Uh, great. This is kind of Dark Angels Iron Storm with Azrael, and the thing about it is though is that we're playing Crucible of Battle, and it's purge the foe. So kill one, kill more, hold one, hold more, and I'm playing 4 pieces of indirect, so
Hmm.
very tough for any army to play against that. Just to tell you how bad Michael's dice were this game, I had one Basilisk to shoot, and he didn't have much left on the board. And I said, you know what? I'll just shoot your Azrael, mate. And he's like, okay, sure. I was like, it's got a 2 up, right? He's like, yeah, he's got a 2 up. And then I was like, okay, I'll just shoot him. 8 shot Basilisk. Okay,
Oh,
3 lethals, and then four other go through for wounding. And I was like, go on, Michael, just roll 4 1s. Rolls 4 1s.
oh.
I was like, mate, come on.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was kind of one of those games. I think I went first that game as well.
Mhm.
And so I was playing the Lehman Russ Battle Tank and the Exterminator, and they kind of combo well together because
Mhm.
especially with Fields of Fire and the Mortar as well. So that you kind of shoot one target with the Exterminator to get on +1 AP. Then you can line the battle cannon up against that, so it's 10 -2 flat 3. And then you can shoot the mortar and then shoot indirect at something else as well. So I was kind of happy with that combo. But
Nice.
I could also see just playing 2 Lehman Russ battle tanks for the rerolls because the rerolls are really good,
Yeah.
especially on UKTC as well. There, so yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
I think
pretty
you
fun
really
game.
seem to like those Lehman Russ battle tanks just operating independently, don't you?
Yeah, because sometimes in UKTC you can put them in outflank, and so corners, for example, you put it in outflank and it comes on the board and it can see into the side objective, either one,
Mhm.
and it just gets 4 rerolls to hit, which is really, really good. You're
Mhm.
operating a 75% chance to hit there as opposed to hitting on threes with a 66% chance. So it makes it really flexible because obviously you can redeploy back into Strike Reserve with them. So I've been loving it. I'm surprised more people don't play it, to be honest with you. It's really, really flexible, which I think is important in an army that's not really that flexible. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I like it. I think a lot of people will be very interested in your kind of list design and things here, Dave, because people maybe don't know exactly where to go with guard, and I think you found an archetype that definitely does work.
yeah, yeah. It's just kind of the list feels so much less all round powerful. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't have the forward staging. It doesn't have the 9 Bullgren or the 6 Bullgren for a combat. To relieve the combat pressure. It's
Yeah.
more of the teams list where you can pick and choose your matchups. Where either
Hmm.
maybe they don't have indirect or they're playing a bit of a gun line themselves, and you can kind of tango. Because the Lehman Russ chassis is reasonably competitive, or hard to kill if you're just in a good old fashioned shootout.
Hmm.
It's not a Riptide though. Riptides are good, but you played against Tyranids. How was that
Yeah.
one?
Oh, so Tyranids are cool. All my practice with T-Suns is from last WTC, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember in last WTC I had a prep game against Matt Robertson, who was
Mm-hmm.
running the Tyranids for Team England, and it was the last game that I played before WTC.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot from that game about how to deal with the Tyranid monsters using T-Suns.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that you have to do is respect the output of the exocrines
Mm-hmm.
into your T-Sun Rubric Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Because as much as, that their profile isn't great, it's just good. But against Rubric Marines, it's brilliant. And you can't allow those units to shoot your Rubric Marines. So priority number one, kill the exocrines or make it so that they can't activate properly. And I managed to get this turn against Josh, where I got all three exocrines, which were together, and I managed to connect my army into those three exocrines and kill all three of them in one turn.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as those three are dead, his other output units are Malceptors. and Malceptors have psychic attacks. T-Suns have a 4-up feel no pain stratagem against psychic attacks. So
Nice.
you basically become invulnerable as soon as the Exocrine die.
Mm-hmm.
Now, saying that, Josh actually made some really slick moves to deny me primary in a few areas. He just about managed to keep scoring his secondaries,
Mm-hmm.
and he managed to keep the score close regardless of the board state,
Mm-hmm.
which was actually really bleak once his Exocrines died.
Yeah, and this
And
is round 2, Purge the Foe, right? So,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, he's did really, really well to end this game as a 14-6 loss. And I think he did. Yeah, he did the best out of his team
Yeah.
here in
He
this
also
round.
had the Tyranids with the acid spray.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Who died very quickly once you turn his armor saves off.
Yeah, I fucking imagine. Oh, dear, sad. Yeah, so love you a bunch, guys. So that was round 2. Boris got. We won that one 88-12, so you can kind of guess the other scores there. Brian rolling over people with the towel in that one as well. Brian, I think. Brian and Yoko, I think, were close to 60 points each on. Yoko was 60 points. Brian was close to 60 points on day 1 as well.
Yeah, I think Yokkel got to 80, didn't he?
Yes.
In the first 4 rounds.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then he was on. Oh no, yeah, it was 80, and then he got like a 80, I think. But yeah, then we got paired down into Vanguard Tactics Team 3.
And by paired down, you mean into someone who had a draw, right? So we had 2 wins.
Yes.
And we got paired down to a win plus a draw team.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I didn't actually know any of these guys were a part of Vanguard Tactics, so it just goes to show how wide
it's a huge
that community
team.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up playing I played against Scott Tennant with the Astra Militarum mirror match. So we had a great time just blasting each other. He had some interesting tactics. He had Slime Arbo, mate. So I mean, pretty good guy. I mean, he knows what's what. But Slime Arbo died turn 1 as I shot him. But he did have 3 Rapier laser destroyer batteries, which is something I'd been looking at. And he put them on top of the big L, and then he got plunging fire with them. That sweet AP5. So that was quite funny. It just goes. It was a bit of a throwback to WTC, when you had Desolation Marines or Dark Reapers on the top floor, and you get your plunging fire with your mastercrafted Vinger launcher.
Awful.
That was a bad time.
Bad time. Very bad time.
He was lovely guy. I went first on that one, and I ended up being able to reposition where I could get a line onto some of his tanks in the early game. He made the critical mistake of deploying on the wrong side of the big L in terms of where you can hide from, whether or not your opponent drives and shoots you or not. And then we talked about that after the game, and I recommended to him as soon as I had deployed my stuff on my side of my rune, he probably should have looked where I deployed mine and seen that he could have deployed in the exact same way. But I mean, lessons learned. Scott was super lovely, and level 17-3 for me. He had no Kaskin too, which was a big differential maker there as well. As you can imagine, a unit you can just chuck away, melt a mine grenade, and the mirror matchup is quite powerful.
Of course, yeah. The output of the Kazakin is actually very deceptive, how much they do.
Yes.
But they're brilliant.
Especially when you consider the fact that they just tag stuff up as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they keep coming back. It's just a free resource almost, just 2 CP resource.
You had the big 20 this round into we were next to each other on the table. And this was a quick game.
I had the quickest game of the round against William Sams with his Chaos Knights.
Yeah.
And actually Chaos Knights are quite an interesting army because they get around one of the weaknesses of knights and vehicle spam in general by having the stratagem to move through walls with some of their knights. So I mean, I think William had a very good list. It was good, but strategically he decided to stat check me. And if you're going to stat check with Chaos Knights against Thousand Suns or any vehicles, it's very important you stay off objectives.
Oh, by the way, this is corner deployment with hidden supplies. So
there's loads of objectives. And William just went first, and he put his whole army on every objective on the board, and he just stood in front of me, and he's like, "You're not going to kill everything."
But at this point in time, though, I looked across the table at you, right? Because we were next to each other, and I looked at you, and I was like, "Well."
Yeah, I gave you a little look, and then I proceeded to kill 5 knights a turn for the first 2 turns, and the game was over by turn 3. So yeah, that was a clean 20-0. The T-Suns absolutely ripped through knights. One rubric squad pretty much kills a knight if it's sitting on an objective. That's
Crazy,
how
right?
devastating the output is.
Yeah, because you get
So
+1 to wound with Magnus too, right? So you're wounding these
exactly.
knights on like 4 sometimes, and it's all like AP 1 and 2. Yeah, and double Doom Bolt there is fantastic, right? You almost kills a knight by itself.
Yeah, and I think there's a break point where the knights, can't take can't take too much attrition,
Yes.
and I think 4 is the point where you start to break a knight army.
Yep.
Where if you kill 4 of the little knights in a turn, they just can't keep up with that level of attrition. Like
Yep.
if you kill the front 4, they can't attack you properly with the next 8.
Yep. And even
In
if
this
you
case,
even if you kill 3, they need to connect into you the next turn, I think, right?
exactly.
If
Yeah,
they lose
3 is
2,
also bad.
if they lose 2 to 1 and they're flipping the objectives and they're
Hmm.
creating a close game, then I think it's kind of fine. And I find the better CK players usually play like that. They play very cagey, right?
Yeah, you
They
have to hide and let your opponent come into your space so that you can attack them at the same time as approaching forward.
Yep.
Because if you just approach forward and just in the open, you're going to lose way too much and not get any trading
Yeah.
going.
Do you actually think that's a bad matchup? Because as a knight player, what if I didn't commit to any objective, and as soon as you went on objective, I just put one knight on it and shot and tried to play that way? Do you think you can still get the board pressure to kill 2 and 3 every turn?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with T-Suns because I think the Chaos Knight's ability to go through walls means that they actually control a huge amount of space on the board.
Hmm.
But you can still measure their maximum movement and put cultists along a strip of where they want to land
It's true.
and end up kind of partially move blocking them.
Yeah.
So I think the T-Suns can still buy themselves 1 or 2 turns.
Yep.
But the more passive you are against T-Suns, the more the score will go towards a draw, which
Yes.
is much safer than risking it and getting blown out by
For
the
sure.
T-Suns.
They have the Havoc launchers too, right? So they can shoot the cultists with the brigands.
Yeah, those Havoc launchers are like really bad. It's my
Yeah.
experience. I mean, they're
Yeah,
okay,
they're not
but
great.
it's just my whole experience of playing against indirect fire in this tournament has just been like, it's just, it's meh.
Yeah.
So, which is a great place to be. I'm very happy about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, so this
Although,
army combines not only
your
yeah
army does have the best indirect in the game, right?
a brilliant indirect. Yeah,
So your
powerful.
experience was great with indirect.
Yeah, to be fair, I rarely use the indirect fire stratagem because
Okay,
for
fair, fair.
people, I think understand T-Suns a lot better than they did in the past, and they understand that that stratagem exists.
Yeah.
But it came up a little bit in 1 or 2 games, but I used it very infrequently, which was quite surprising. But it was mostly because most people ran at me, so
Yeah.
I didn't need indirect fire when I could just direct fire them.
Fuck it, I'll use it anyway.
Yeah, you get ignored cover if you use it. So
Yeah, getting more coverage.
yeah.
So good. Oh dear. So we went Sleepy Hollows and we're off to round 2. Round 4, sorry, but day 2.
4. It's spicing up now. It's getting harder.
Yes. Now we played Sternguard Fat Tits, who are just full of a bunch of guys that we play all the time at UKTC, right? So
Yeah.
this is with Liam Calibut, who had the Storm Raven that exploded and dealt like 40 mortal wounds to his
At the
armor
last tournament, yeah.
Dean Murphy on Orks, Jay Seaburn. I'm gonna apologies, Jay, if I didn't get your last name right there, but Jay's been around the scene for ages as well. He's a lovely player. And then we got Adam Shepherd Jones, who organizes the Beachhead Brawl Bournemouth tournament, and then Danny Everson, who has also been around for a long time. In fact, the first tournament no, not the first tournament I played, but I played Danny first time at a Glass Hammer tournament, a small GT there. We played Admech versus what's that thing? Iron Hands. And a really close game there as well. That's the first time I played against Danny. So yeah, a lovely bunch of guys. And I think our pairings were. This is angular deployment, wasn't it? Our pairings were looking quite good because Adam was playing Custodes as well, and I think Danny was also playing a version of Tau that didn't really have as much pressure. And I guess that's an interesting conversation between the Montcar versus Kaoyun builds, isn't it as well?
So Danny was playing Kalyon, right?
He was playing
Yeah.
Kaoyun, yeah. And I
Yeah, with a
personally
lot
thought,
of breaches.
yeah, I personally thought that Montcar was a lot more scary to pair against, especially on the UKTC boards.
On
Because the
UKTC,
angles
I
you
agree.
push are so
Yep.
scary. Like your Riptide can go 22 inches turn 1, shoot
Mhm.
into a ruin. It can be on the board edge turn 1, which is quite difficult to play against, right, or to deploy
Very
against.
difficult to deal with, absolutely.
Yeah. So another orc again, right? Mr. Dean Murphy, you just
Yeah,
oof.
a very similar list. So it was still, the maximum number of mega knobs,
Yes.
and he also had this big brick of Squig Boys with the dinosaur character
Oh
guy.
yes, he was playing the Squigbot
Yeah,
boys. Yeah,
that's
it's
that extends the threat range a little bit.
mm,
But the whole army still gets move blocked. So
yep.
the difference between Dean and Isaac is, I think Dean had picked up this army just for this tournament,
Okay. Yep.
whereas Isaac had been playing orcs, really well for a while.
Okay.
So Dean was still trying to get his kind of like trying to work out how his army kind of plays the macro strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually found this one a little bit easier. A,
Mm-hmm.
because I had a practice game into Bully Boys. I was now warmed up with the T Suns. And now actually I felt like I had more experience than my opponent in this matchup. So I knew what was going to die when I shot it. And I also got the strategy more refined of castling in a corner, spending 2 turns with the cultist move blocking,
Yes.
picking away at things, and then eventually Dean has to commit to me,
Mm-hmm.
and he sent his whole army in, and it all died across 2 turns. And it ended up as a 19-1 here. Dean, he's super lovely. I think we had a really, really fun game.
Mm-hmm.
But the T Suns were very dominant against a Bully Boys list that runs at them.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think Boris played against Liam and killed the Storm Raven on turn one with the Sisters Army. So
Oh,
that was a bit of a tough one, but still a
oh
14 point
yes, he
despite that.
did.
I remember looking over and Liam had a couple of Redemptors really deep in Boris's line. So Liam managing to claw back, still a 6-14 despite this Storm Raven going down turn one. And the Storm Raven's pretty good against Sisters. Moonstone
Yeah,
weakness shreds a lot of those units.
yeah. Liam's
Uh,
obviously a very, very good player, so that does help. And the sisters are also notorious for not being able to push a high differential.
yes,
So
definitely.
yeah, this kind of adds up despite a good first turn swing.
Right. And then we had Brian playing Grey Knights. Now, this it's an important match, this one, because we kind of thought Tau was all right against Grey Knights. Difficult to say,
Well,
right? Because
well,
Yoko
if you
also
line
had
up the
that strategy.
profiles, right?
Mm,
Here's the thing: the Ion, both on the Riptide and on the Hammerheads, is a higher strength than the toughness of Dread Knights.
mm-hmm,
It's 3 or 4 damage, so it kills Terminators.
mm-hmm.
And the AP is a minimum of 2 with easy access to ignore cover. Everything adds up to the perfect output profiles versus Grey Knights, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we found that actually the Tau really struggle against Grey Knights. And
Yeah.
Brian had a tough time here in this matchup.
And I think maybe, and I'm speculating as well, but the Grey Knights do have the ability to kill a lot of the Tau chaff without the Tau being able to necessarily interact and stop that, right? And I found a lot of the Tau army can turn off if you definitely ask your opponent which units have marker lights attached to them,
Yep.
and begin by killing those, and then being able to turn off the maximum number of guide units, all of a sudden they can have a turn where they're not dealing as much as they should, and it can really snowball after that. Like you leave a Dreadnought on 1 wound, might as well be on 12 wounds, mate.
Mhm.
Still gonna have the same amount of impact on the board, and that can be really punishing to come back from.
Yep, and a mid-board Dread Knight on, that's still alive, regardless of how little wounds it has, being able to then charge and shoot
Mm-hmm.
and tank shock is a lot of extra output that you weren't accounting for. And I think
Yeah.
Brian had a turn where Jay's army was in front of him, in different parts of the board. And Brian wasn't able to output the damage because, be it he rolled too little or, he didn't see this coming, whatever. It sounded like his rolls just went to pot, and that can happen with a shooting army.
Yep.
And then you just get smacked afterwards.
Definitely can. And on the other side, Yoko also got the 20 against Danny. So our Grey Knights also got 20 against Tal. So,
Oh,
quite an
yeah, there you
improvement
go.
in those matchups. I
Absolutely.
played against Adam and his Adeptus Custodes. 16-4 for me. And I did go first that game as well, which I think is indicative of that matchup. Now, I have to say that Adam was going through his detachment rules and what his stratagems are. And that Custodes book seems shockingly bad. I'm
Poor Custodes.
I'm sorry, man. Like what he was telling me was just like, are we playing like fifth edition or something like that? Because no, fifth edition probably had way better rules. What am I
Yeah.
saying? But it was terrible. I was like, come on, man. Yeah. So, yep.
Yeah,
It was
poor
kind of like,
Custodes.
how many 3 wound models do you have? I've got 2 manticores. let's destroy some models.
Yeah.
Nothing
So
but
yeah,
turtle
you got a really big win there with the 16-4 as well against lovely Adam.
And then on to round 5, where we played Wrath of Magnums. This is the Team Wales team, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and
Gosh, did they give us a run for our money there in
yeah,
this round?
these guys were really good, man.
They were.
We was kind of stressing out there in the beginning for sure. We
Mhm.
thought that our pairings were, I guess, pretty decent, right? Um,
No, I think we yeah, I think
no,
we thought our pairings were around a draw,
yeah,
but we had got our matrix wrong. Despite it being a draw, I think we'd overestimated some of these matchups.
yes, yeah. And the key one of that being Yokel versus the Leagues of Votann, who we thought was a
Correct.
4. And the Leagues of Votann rolled some crazy good shots from what I heard. One tapping some units on turn 1 with the sustained ability, or just the D6 plus 6 rolling 12 damage. And then and at the same time, we thought we knew our tower was, well, we didn't know, but we thought our tower was about a 4 into Leagues of Votann as well. So we decided to go for the tower versus Grey Knights instead of and then take Grey Knights versus Leagues of Votann.
Well, it was actually more than that because they had this Blood Angel list that was very weird, which was an Ironstorm Blood Angel list.
Mm-hmm.
They had the Grey Knights and the Leagues of Votann.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Thousand Suns, the Tau, and the Grey Knights. We basically had a little bit of control how those pairings went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we actively chose to kind of sacrifice the Thousand Suns into this Blood Angels list
Mm-hmm.
to let Brian fight for the 10 so that Yokel could get the huge win into the
Yeah.
Leagues of Votann.
Mm-hmm.
And because actually both the T Suns and the Tau, we had matrix for very good wins into the Leagues of Votann.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone had a big win into Leagues of Votann at all.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
we also had me as a good win into Thousand Suns as well.
Correct. Yeah.
That was a pairing where we decided to take as well.
Yeah. So in all of this, I was the one who was thrown most under the bus because actually I was playing against Nick Council,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Nick's list lines up so well into the T Suns. It's unbelievably bad matchup. Because he had
Nick's playing Ironstorm, by the way. He's playing Blood Angels
Ironstorm.
and he has the Blood Angel Predators, for example. Right?
Yeah. So we had triple ball predators, which are brilliant into rubrics, high threat range. They move 12 anyway. They can advance and shoot with 2 damage flamers. This is nightmare territory for T-Suns. And then he had a whirlwind in the back, which constantly chips away at the exalted sorcerers, so they can't survive. And then he also had 2 lancers on top of having 3 predators with las cannons. So this means that Magnus can't survive in the open.
Yeah.
Because everything has hunter killer missiles as well. So basically, his army lines up perfectly across the board. So I'm going into this.
What I would say is the Blood Angels. This is the first time I've seen the Blood Angels variant of the Ironstorm. It's quite interesting, that one. Eh? You don't get the multi melters, but you do get access to the flamer tanks, which at damage 2 flamer is quite powerful, obviously.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But I think there are some games where it's going to be relevant because it's basically the Redeemer flamer, right?
Yeah.
And we know that that's quite good in the meta. But it's very good for teams because there are some matchups which typically you may not win that reliably, which suddenly you win reliably. And I know Nick had been playing against the T Suns lots, and he'd won it lots of times, every time. So I needed either a little bit of luck or just to get some momentum in this game.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I necessarily got the luck, but I did manage to get momentum. And it was done by Deep Striking Magnus, which was Dave's idea. I have to give Dave credit for this. He's been telling me for ages, just Deep Strike Magnus, it's fine. And I Deep Struck Magnus, Rapid Ingressed him here.
Oh, and the Rapid Ingress.
Yeah, and the Rapid Ingress was really interesting because Ironstorm has Advance and Shoot, right? But if you advance all of these tanks to get into positions on the board and your character is in one place, there is going to be a part of the board where he can't shoot,
Nice.
So I rapid ingressed into that spot. Nick reminded me, look, these tanks can't shoot. I was like, okay, cool. We're going right down in the middle of this space. Yeah. I measured out the 16, so Magnus can move over 1 tank. The rest of my army can attack that 1 tank. And then Magnus can punch another tank, shoot another tank, and indirect fire another tank.
Yeah, pretty
So,
impressive. And Magnus's
so
melee is not terrible as well, right? Like if you can tag some tanks up, maybe if you can doombolt the fallback character and tag some stuff,
mhm.
it's pretty big.
Yeah, well, between the double Doombolt, a turn off armor saves, Magnus doing all his stuff, and all the army activating in a couple of spots, I was able to kill 4 tanks that turn,
Mm,
and be in a forward position on the objectives. And yeah, Nick really struggled to take me off my expansion objective because I'd cleared an entire flank of his.
yeah.
And I was able to maintain my primary and keep him down to 5s.
Mm,
So at this point, I'm looking at like 13 points here
mm-hmm.
in the game already. So I've gone from losing a 6 point loss to telling our team, look, I'm getting 13 points and it's on a little piece of paper.
You should listen to me more
Uh,
often, bro.
and
Sorry.
then a couple of tiny little things happened. He was forced at this point to have a go turn into Magnus, which he just about managed to kill. So Magnus got removed off the board, and then yeah, lots of little grinding in a few different places,
Mm-hmm.
and I basically got stuck onto 2 objectives now,
Yeah.
and I
Because
was
he
able
was
to
kind of
get
locked in his deployment zone as a large part of that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting 15s at the end,
Mm,
through like the correct sequence of trading,
mm.
and he just couldn't catch up, and the game ended up as a 16-4, which kind of between your game and my game ended up
Yeah.
allowing us to win the round, didn't it?
Yeah, there's a bit of context here. We actually had us at getting 43 points, I think, or 48 points about 20 minutes into
Hmm.
this round. So
Hmm.
Vic and I, old Fireside podcast over here, were playing next to each other on the tables, and we both looked at each other. We were like, "All right, time to put the fucking screws on." And we both that's what we both did, right? We were like, "Okay, we need to start pushing a bit harder here."
Yeah,
And I,
yeah.
in my mindset, I was like, "Okay, I need to start pressuring 15s, etc., etc." Yeah, yeah. So that's funny. Oh, by the way, can you? Is it not viable to go for the Doom Bolt on the Tech Marine that has the fallback and shoot?
Yeah,
And
but
then
you
tag
almost
him?
don't want to. What you don't want to do is overextend with anything that isn't Magnus.
Yeah.
Um, but he kind of kept that guy behind a wall most of the game, to be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, I mean, if it was in the open, I'd 100% because
Mm,
then I can tag stuff and he can't fall back and shoot. It's kind
yeah.
of spicy.
Yeah, definitely.
But he
I
was
play.
quite careful with that guy.
Yeah. I so once again, I had a good matchup here. I got good matchups all weekend. So if you look at my scores and think, man, Astro's Militar was really good, I was getting good matchups all weekend basically. Um,
Nice.
I played against Adam Ryland, who I have never played before,
Mhm.
and super lovely guy. He was
Oh,
playing
he's so
Thousand Suns,
nice.
and after those practice games with Thousand Suns, Vic, I just had such a better understanding of the matchup. It was
Mm.
crazy. Like I understood that. Hey, look, if I put something on this objective and you come out and kill it, that I can kill that Rubik's squad for free, and you've only got like 5 assets, mate. So
Hmm.
you come out, you might deny a primary for a turn. But as long as I can hold that objective the next turn, I've got something to go on that objective and kill the unit, then it's a tough proposition. And if there's ever a chance where I can get an attack angle on a rubric squad before you can activate them, then I'm in profit range.
Yep.
Um, Adam had one of those lists that wasn't really accounting for the indirect potential, right? Like he didn't have a Rhino, he had 3 Infernal Master squads, and then he had 2 Sorcerer squads, but he had a 20-man unit with the crystal of Zangors, I want to say, which is a bit
Yes,
unique.
correct.
I
Yeah.
hadn't seen that before. And so my list was really primed to deal with this list. Basically, 4 pieces of indirect will kill, uh, on average, the 5-man rubric and the character, basically. Which, I mean, to be fair, is about 800 or 700 odd points plus all the
Hmm.
supporting packages. So even that level of attrition can put a huge clock on the T-Suns, and if you can push them and start making them trade elsewhere on top of that, they're going to bleed a lot of units really fast.
Yep.
Now,
Absolutely.
the one spicy thing of the game is that Adam tried to take his expansion objective with the 20-man Zangor unit, and then I bring my um, battle tank in from reserve, of course, and then had the plasma sponsons because I ran plasma sponsons for all my vehicles this tournament, and I got like +4 shots on each one, so
Oh.
and 4 rerolls to hit. So I was able to clean that unit up quickly, which was good. But I dedicated a lot of assets to do that. I got very, very lucky. We had one of those turns where it was a 17-3, but it would have been like a 14-6 had I not killed Magnus on the last turn with the last gun.
Oh.
So I had indirected Magnus the previous turn because I knew that he was going to run out of squads for me to indirect. So instead of going for the other squads, He had like one more squad, I think. I decided to launch all my indirect at Magnus if I could get him off 2 turns, and because I figured out that if you whittle Magnus down to half, then the T Suns players they don't really have much of an option to play with him if they've still got one more turn in the game. So, but if he was at full capacity, then he could probably use him to play aggressively for 1 turn.
Mhm.
So yeah, I managed to get Magnus down. I think I managed to put 10 damage through him with my indirect, and I rolled quite well there as well. And then with my
Beautiful.
whole army, with all my indirect and a tank and something else, I managed to get the very last wound down on him. On the last las cannon, once he had used 3 rerolls and a blank. So that kind of changed it where he had bottom of turn, he couldn't jump onto an objective, kill something for no prisoners or overarming force, and then get probably at least 8 more points.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a lovely game, but it was definitely one of those games where because I'd played T Suns, I kind of understood the matchup a lot more.
Yeah, understood the limitations and the
Yes.
threat ranges. Yeah,
Yeah.
massive.
So yeah, round 6, England again. And it was, and on a side note, I really appreciated the fact they called themselves the England Lions this time. I think that
Yes,
I
instead of
think that's cool.
extinguish.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, man. Like, I think you either win as a team or you lose as a team, and I think that's a really good mentality to have. And so yeah, like, where should we start on this one?
Yeah. So this one, late in the day, and this was probably the round that we technically prepared the most for. What do you think?
Yeah, it's fair to say that. Yeah,
Because this is the matchup like we're most worried about. These players are really equal
yeah.
skill to us,
There's
and
not there's not a lot in
very
here to be fair, right?
experienced. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what did you think about the pairings, Dave? Let's do all the pairings and where you are, because you're better at pairings than
Pairings.
me.
I think we came off well in the pairings. From our side, we had this as well, but there's a bit of context here. We just needed to play for a draw, which means we needed to get 2 more points than we did, 3 more points than we did, I think.
Because we had so many more battle points across the other games that if
Yes.
it ended up as a draw and we used battle points as a tiebreaker, we would win no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think on our matrix we had this down as a 16.5 out of a total possible 30. No, sorry, 5. Out of a total possible 30. So basically, on our matrix we had it as a slight win. Um, where we went wrong is that we didn't really understand some of the lists, and we maybe misplayed one of the matchups.
Mm.
Christopher Kinnear's list, the Chaos Space Marines one with Abaddon 10 Terminators, I feel like I would have loved to play against that, but we had that down as a win for Grey Knights, and Yoko and I, all the guys were chatting about it in the car afterwards, and Yoko still thought going first it's a 3.5, going second is a 2.5.
So
But
that's
he
a
said,
small win or a bigger win, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. But he said, props to Christopher Kinnear. He played it absolutely excellently. The screens are absolutely perfect, and I think that's probably because Chris had played Grey Knights quite a bit before that as well, right?
Chris is just good. He's just
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
good player. Yeah.
So props to Chris because I know Yokel got the better of him last time. So it was I think Yokel even chatted to him after and said, you played really really well. So that was awesome. Then we had I mean I love this game. I had myself versus Nathan Roberts, who I've played once before at
Mhm.
Warhammer Fest. Where I got the high side of the dice here with his Chaos Knights, but he's always lovely to play against. He had a bit of an
Mhm.
interesting Death Guard list. Now I had this down as a 14 to probably between a 10 to 14, maybe 15, but Nathan went first, and Nathan got a little bit, Nathan didn't get lucky. I got unlucky, but Nathan shot 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, and I
Mhm.
think he rolled like 3, 5, and 3 shots, something like that, and killed 10 of my Kaskin turn 1, which
Ouch.
is really big because turn 1 you can't respawn them.
Mhm.
Now, on perfectly average dice, this happens 0.2% of the time because you need to get 20 wounds through. You hit on 4s, wound on 2s with lethals, and I get a 4-up save against them. If you roll 666 number of shots, it happens 10.9% of the time. Now,
Oh my god.
obviously, dice happen. It's a dice game, but I was just curious because I failed 6 4-ups in a row on the last one. I was like, God damn it.
Ouch.
So yeah, that was great. And then he every time he shot the Kaskin, even if I gave myself plus OC, which means I was leadership 6, he managed to battle shock them, so I couldn't respawn them. So I didn't respawn a single Kaskin unit. And when you pay
Ouch.
120 points for them, it's pretty expensive.
Hmm.
He also went first and managed to sticky the middle objective. Now, the only error he made one game, which he said afterwards, he's like, "Yeah, I was an idiot. I was meant to move those." Was that he let me slingshot my unit to unsticky it, which was quite big. But other than that, he played really, really, really well. I couldn't really think of anything else. It's more the fact that my tanks just line up so well against his tanks. Like, a Predator Destructor, you just pop smoke against it. If it hits you, if it wounds you, you get a 4-up against it. It's not doing that much realistically. The auto cannon is hitting on 4s, wounding on 5s. You get a 2-up against it, right? So eventually I can just the round was not going great. I had it down as an 8 after Nathan's first turn,
Hmm.
but it wasn't. But I just let him have an objective on the side, and I thought I'm just going to play for one side of the objective, and then on turn 4 I'm going to push out. Turn 3 I'm going to push out to force a 15 and then a 15 back to back, and that's hopefully where I can get an advantage. But yeah, I took Bring It Down homers and forgot to do Bring It Down turn 1, so I'm just a great player. But
No.
there's an interesting list from Nathan. He had a lot of anti-infantry, so it definitely probably wasn't the matchup he wanted. And I think on turn 4, I said, Nathan, it's going to be the deciding turn, whether or not it's going to be a 10-10 or an 11-9, I think. And I said, I feel like I'm in for a draw here. And he said, I would love to get a draw. So I think, Nathan, we were both on the same side of the fence here in terms of
Mhm.
what each player's role was. And that's a fun game to play, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
lovely game as always. Nathan's a great opponent.
absolutely.
What about
I mean,
yourself?
we,
You put up big numbers though, right?
yeah, I mean, well, before we get to me, let's do Boris, who actually hit his matrix score.
Yes.
Uh, I think Boris was the only one who actually hit his matrix score correctly,
That's fair.
um, and he played, with his sisters against Alex Harrison's
Mm-hmm.
Ironstorm list that he's been rocking for a
Yep.
while. And actually, I was a little worried for Boris on this map
Okay.
because the firing lanes into the midfield are pretty much open. You can't really hold anything in the middle without getting shot.
Definitely.
And the Ironstorm list absolutely has a lot of firepower. So
Yep.
I think Boris has done extremely well to get a 9-point loss here. So it's a 9-11, which was exactly what he predicted on his matrix.
Definitely. Yeah.
Uh,
Boris was super chuffed back in the car ride home. He said he played super passive. Both players took Bring It Down homers, and he managed to eke out a very narrow loss there, which is a very good result.
Yeah, and Boris was right up there in terms of like individual player scores across this tournament
Yes.
with sisters, which is really quite impressive. So,
Yep.
yeah, fair play to Boris, Team England. Let's go.
Indeed.
Then, yeah, I had my game against Manny.
Mm-hmm.
So a Team England off here, Manny versus Vic, and but we kind of, he's been rocking the Thousand Suns for a bit. I've been practicing with the Eldari, and we kind of swap places here, and I was playing the T Suns versus him using his MSU Eldari.
Mm-hmm.
And this game is an extremely fascinating game, especially coming from the point of view of someone who understands both armies really, really well.
Mm.
And Eldari, I understand all of their weaknesses and strengths. So going into this game, I try to think what is the macro strategy that the Eldar player would least like me to do in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I've played this matchup a number of times from the Eldari side. And the strategy I went for in this game is that my single most important unit, because Manny has these 3D cannons, he has 3 Shadow Spectres, 3 Scourge, 3 Warp Spot,
Yeah.
loads of things, everything fast. My key unit in this game, because his 3D cannons are very static, is my Sorcerer unit. I have one unit with a Sorcerer who can't be shot outside 18.
Mm-hmm.
On this board, the midfield is a killing zone, but the sorcerer unit can stand inside D cannon range and still not be shot if it's outside of 18, which is very doable on my expansion objective.
Yep.
Whereas he can't really stand on any objective in the middle without me killing him. So I can create a primary differential by creating a situation where my sorcerer unit is safe to stand in the midfield.
Mm-hmm.
In order to do that, I had to pick away at some of his faster units that are good at killing rubrics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's mainly his warp spiders and his shadow specters. Those are the only 2 targets for me. So the first 2 turns of the game, I spent my time kind of throwing an Exalted Sorcerer on disc over, doom bolting 1 unit of Shadow Spectres. They only have 5 wounds, not 6, so they kind of die a bit more reliably to the doom bolt.
That's good to know.
and then shooting with the flamer into another unit, and then activating the indirect fire, and then shooting with another unit. And then another turn, I shot my Umbralific Crystal unit over, temporal surge them so they move forward and see into a ruin, and then kind of pick away at these units. And after turn 2, when those units were depleted, and I think he was down to just a single Warp Spider unit out of those fast units, I put my sorcerer on the midfield. I put my whole army on the midfield objectives and said, okay, you go. You can't decannon everything now.
Yep.
The only thing I kept out of decannon range, I think, was Magnus. I was still a little cautious with Magnus.
Yeah.
And what happened was the momentum shifted really aggressively in my favor once I got into that position,
Mm-hmm.
because Manny was then unable to activate properly into my army, and he managed to kill 2 Rubric squads. But now I was forward positioned with 3 Rubric squads and Magnus, and he was essentially getting tabled by turn 5. Um, so yeah, it ended up as a slightly bigger win to the Thousand Suns than could have been expected. And actually, Manny was on the very cusp of losing this, kind of between 16 to 18 points.
Yeah.
He was literally down to nothing, and I had an Overwatch on the last turn, which to kill 2 models with Magnus, which is very likely. And if both of those models die, he's down another 12 points.
Wow.
So that could have been a really big loss for him, but he managed to survive with one of those two Dark Reaper
Wow.
models.
Sick play.
So
It's really good
yeah,
to detail down that macro strategy. I'm sure that's going to help people out.
absolutely. So yeah, 15-5 win versus Manny, and in my head, I'm just playing this game and concentrating so much. I'm thinking I've got 15 points. Like surely we can get a draw off that, because I've gone 5 above my matrix here.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, so
And so the last game was Brian versus Josh Roberts, 18 Wraiths, and that was a 4-16 loss for Brian. And I think that's probably the one of the macro errors we had here. I think as well is that I mean there's a couple of lessons to take away from our tournament for us in particular, and one we were talking about the car is that if there's a matchup or a list we're really unsure about, we need to prioritize getting at least one game into that the week after the week before. Surprise, surprise! If people don't know, we actually don't play as much as people suspect. So,
yeah.
especially with WTC practice as well.
Mhm.
We didn't even play a game against something. So that was probably crucial. And getting a game against a matchup where we think is very likely to happen. It was very likely on all of our pairing simulations that Brian plays Necrons. And so getting that matchup in practice was critical as well. Now it was a 16-4 to Josh, but I think in retrospect, Brian definitely thinks it's closer to an 8 to 9 loss if you just don't play the game. And that's very common with race as well, is that you really just don't want to play aggressive against them because then they can activate a lot of their army. And if you just play for a low loss, oftentimes that's gonna occur, which is obviously why their list is very powerful in a singles environment because it's very hard to score secondaries against and can take narrow wins quite often.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a tough one. I think um, the way I always describe it, and like philosophically for teams tournaments, I think it's much worse to get completely like if you've got this risk where it's 50-50 going in one direction, you get all the glory of going way above your matrix,
Mm-hmm.
or you have the chance of just getting completely blown out. I think it's very rarely, unless your team desperately needs it, it's very rarely worth it going for the glory play.
Yeah.
You are much better off in teams for the sake of your team, just being extremely like safe and not getting blown out. Like, so that's something which happened a lot to us, I think, in WTC last year
Yep.
for England. Like we took 20-0 losses when we absolutely have the player skill not to get blown out that hard,
Yep.
and just avoiding that from happening and just accepting, look, I'm going to get 9 points for my team and I don't care if it looks like a loss on my record.
Mm-hmm.
Like just put aside the ego side of
Yeah.
like I have to smash my opponents, I have to win
Yeah.
every single game, I have to be top of the player rankings, and just accept a small loss.
Yeah, and actually, I went into this tournament as a defender list, didn't I? For most of the
Hmm.
most of the tournament, I was just saying, I'm just gonna okay, I can play guard. I'm pretty sure I can get threes against almost everything or something like that, and I'll just play for a draw. And sometimes you just got to be in that mindset, right? Like, I'm playing for an 8. Like, okay, I'm sitting on my home field, you know. And sometimes you sit on your home field and your opponent overextends into you, and then you go, oh, okay,
There you go. Now
I can
it's
get more than 8.
12. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right.
Now I'll predict it to my coach. I'm getting a 12 or a 13, coach.
Exactly. And
But
actually,
yeah.
I was going to say a strong defensive player who knows how to play a loss is actually it's quite a skill to have, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Hard
very
to develop.
useful to have someone to say, look, I will bring you back 8 points in this game. And
Yeah.
then, if it goes up, great. But it's not going below 8, Captain,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I guess should we round it off there? But a big
Oh, wait. Yeah.
congratulations. Oh,
One last thing about Brian, because I do want to say that his ability to reflect on things and take learning points is quite impressive, because I think immediately after the tournament, he immediately identified that he kind of saw red, he pushed at inappropriate times, etc. All of these things. And what I kind of described there is exactly a philosophy that he kind of took on board immediately.
yeah.
And I think that's a characteristic of players who become very good very quickly, which is exactly what Brian's kind of doing over a very short period of time.
I mean,
So,
what a good time to learn that lesson, though, right? As well.
oh, just before WTC.
Just before WTC.
Absolutely.
If you get the red in your eyes, sometimes you got to take a double check. And actually, this is a point that we didn't do well this event as well, is that we didn't have a comprehensive captain to negotiate all of our scores and someone as a central point of information where we can go, do I need to push? Go for that, which is something for us to reflect on as well. And that's probably the time where do I need to push? Do I need to go for that as well there as well? But yeah, I mean, I already know that Brian's going to do super well at
Definitely.
WTC. I mean, he destroyed last WTC as well, obviously.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, I mean, a great time to learn it. And what did you think the ITT was some good practice, Vic? Did you enjoy it overall?
I did really enjoy it. I mean, it felt a little like chilled out, and at times, I have to be honest, it did feel a little pointless.
Okay.
But it's always good to play Warhammer, isn't it? And
Yes.
I really enjoyed digging out the T-Suns.
Yep.
Dusting them off, and then putting them on the table and reminding myself just how great it was in last year's WTC.
There we go. I'm starting to practice some T-Suns. I'm liking that.
Yes, Dave.
I want to get some magic.
That's a spicy army, I think it has its weaknesses, I have to say,
sure.
but it is a spicy army.
It'll be interesting to see how people play against Thousand Suns, because as it currently stands, is definitely going to be a big hitter at WTC. And I think playing against Thousand Suns is a real skill in and of itself, I think, isn't it? It's definitely it's probably the most misunderstood army, right?
Yep. It's very easy, but I won't spoil it, Dave, because I want you to go smash with T-Suns. So
I don't get that. I don't get the hookups. I see how it is.
Oh no, for your opponents.
Oh. There we go. Episode 53. It's been a little while, guys, but we're going to keep it cracking. And we'll see you next time by the Fireside.
See you guys. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the 40K Fireside podcast. Vic and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.